It was a bright, sunny Saturday morning in Maple Grove. This was a small neighborhood where everybody knew everybody, or at least, that's what they thought. The houses were neat and cozy, with green lawns and flowers popping up everywhere. Kids rode bikes down the street, and old folks sat on porches sipping lemonade. It was the kind of place where nothing big ever happened. Or so people said. But today, something was brewing, something sneaky and exciting, and it all started with a guy named Jake Carter. Jake was the new guy in town. He rolled into Maple Grove one day with a rusty old truck that coughed and sputtered like it was tired. In the back of that truck, he had a few boxes, a lumpy old couch, and his best buddy, a goofy dog named Max. Max was big and floppy, with floppy ears and a wagging tail that never stopped. He had a big grin, too, like he was always happy to see you. Jake and Max moved into a little house on Oak Street, the kind with a small porch and a patchy lawn. Jake didn't have much stuff, just the basics. Oh, and one more thing, a welcome mat. It was a plain old mat, nothing fancy, with the words "Wipe Your Paws" written on it in big, friendly letters. Jake plopped it down by his front door, and that was that. Jake was a quiet guy. He didn't talk much. Every morning, he'd pull on an old cap, grab a leash, and take Max for a walk around the block. Max would bounce along, sniffing bushes and chasing squirrels, while Jake just strolled behind, hands in his pockets. Sometimes he'd mow his lawn with a rickety mower that sounded like it might fall apart. Other times, he'd sit on his porch with a soda, watching the world go by. If you waved at him, he'd wave back. If you said hi, he'd say hi back. Simple, right? That's what Jake was, just a regular guy with a dog and a mat. At least, that's what everybody thought. But here's the thing, not everyone liked Jake. Someone in Maple Grove was watching him, and they weren't happy about it. This person had sharp eyes and a grumpy face, and they didn't like new people messing up their perfect little world. To them, Jake wasn't just a guy with a dog. He was trouble. His truck was too loud, his dog was too bouncy, and that welcome mat. Oh, they hated that mat most of all. It didn't fit their rules. It wasn't neat or proper. It was just there, sitting crooked by Jake's door, like it was laughing at them. Who was this grumpy watcher? Why did they care so much about a guy who didn't even make noise? You're gonna find out soon, so don't go anywhere. This story's about to get wild. Let's back up a little. Jake didn't come to Maple Grove looking for trouble. He just wanted a quiet place to live. He'd been driving around for weeks, looking for a spot to call home. When he saw the for sale sign on that little house, he stopped his truck, scratched Max behind the ears, and said, "This is it, buddy." The house wasn't much, just one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a yard big enough for Max to run around. But it was enough. Jake didn't need fancy things. He liked keeping life easy. So he signed some papers, moved his boxes in, and set up that mat. Done. He was ready to start fresh. The first few days were peaceful. Jake unpacked his stuff, some clothes, a couple of pots and pans, and a squeaky toy for Max. He met a few neighbors, too. There was Mrs. Jenkins across the street, who gave him a wave and a plate of cookies. There was Tim, the mailman, who said, "Nice dog," when Max licked his hand. Everyone seemed friendly enough. Jake figured he'd fit right in. He wasn't loud or messy. He didn't throw parties or leave trash everywhere. He was just Jake. What could go wrong? But then, the watchers started watching. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was little things. Jake would be watering his grass, and he'd feel eyes on him like someone was peeking from behind a curtain. He'd turn around, but no one was there. Or he'd walk Max, and he'd hear a huff, like someone was mad, but when he looked, the street was empty. One day, he found a note stuck to his mailbox. It said, "Fix your mat," in big, angry letters. Jake scratched his head. Fix his mat? It wasn't broken. It was just a mat. He shrugged, tossed the note in the trash, and went back to his day. But deep down, he knew something was up. Someone didn't like him being there. Someone was waiting for him to mess up. Who was this mystery person? Why were they so mad about a guy with a truck, a dog, and a silly mat? Was it the mat's fault? Was it Max? Or was it something bigger, something Jake didn't even know about yet? The answers are coming, and trust me, they're gonna surprise you. This isn't just a story about a grumpy neighbor. It's a story about secrets, sneaky plans, and one big twist you won't see coming. So stick around, you're gonna want to hear what happens next. Oh, and hey, before we keep going, I've got a quick question for you. Where are you reading this from today? Are you at home, at school, maybe outside with your own dog? Drop it in the comments, I'm super curious. And if you like stories like this, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next part. Jake's tale is just getting started, and it's about to get really, really good. See, Jake didn't know it yet, but he'd walked into a neighborhood with more going on than met the eye. Maple Grove looked sleepy and sweet, but under the surface, things were bubbling. That watcher? They weren't just annoyed, they were hiding something. And Jake? He wasn't just a guy with a dog, he was something else, too. Something nobody expected. What was it? How did it all connect to that goofy wipe your paws mat? You'll find out soon. For now, picture Jake kicking back on his porch, Max snoozing by his feet, totally clueless about the storm heading his way. It's gonna be a wild ride, don't miss it. Now, let's meet Linda Grayson. She wasn't just any neighbor in Maple Grove, she was the boss of the Homeowners Association, or HOA for short. Everyone called her the unofficial queen because she acted like she ruled the place. But behind her back, people had another name for her, HOA Karen. That's what you got called if you parked your car a tiny bit too close to her driveway or forgot to mow your lawn on time. Linda didn't mess around. She carried a clipboard everywhere, scribbling notes about anything she didn't like. Her eyes were sharp, and her glare? It could scare anyone, even the toughest kids on the block. And worst of all, Linda loved sticking her nose into everybody's business, whether they wanted her there or not. From the very first day Jake Carter moved in, Linda decided she didn't like him. She stood on her porch that morning, arms crossed, watching him unload his rusty truck. She saw Max, his goofy dog, hopping around, and she saw that welcome mat that said "Wipe your paws." Right away, her face scrunched up like she'd bitten a sour lemon. That mat's an eyesore, she grumbled to herself. Later, she told her coffee klatch crew, the group of neighbors who met every morning to sip coffee and gossip. "It's ugly," she said, waving her hands. "It doesn't match the neighborhood. And that dog? Too loud. He barks too much." Her friends nodded, agreeing with everything she said, because that's what they always did. Linda didn't stop at complaining. Oh no, she took action. The next day, she marched right over to Jake's yard, her clipboard tucked under her arm like a shield. Jake was outside, tossing a ball for Max, when she showed up. "Hey, you," she shouted, pointing at him. "You need to fix this. That mat breaks the rules, and your dog's noise is bothering everyone." Her voice was loud and bossy, like a teacher scolding a kid for running in the hall. Jake looked up, surprised, but he didn't get mad. He just smiled a small, easy smile and said, "Okay, I'll keep it in mind." Then he went back to playing with Max. Linda huffed, stomping back to her house. She didn't like that he didn't argue. She wanted a fight, but Jake wouldn't give her one. That made Linda even madder. She didn't get it. Why wasn't Jake scared of her? Most people in Maple Grove listened when she yelled. They'd fix their yards or quiet their dogs because Linda was in charge, at least, she thought she was. But Jake? He didn't care. He kept walking Max every morning, letting him bark at squirrels. He kept that mat right where it was, even if it was a little crooked. And every time Linda complained, he'd just nod and say, "Sure thing," with that same calm smile. It drove her crazy. "Who does he think he is?" she muttered to her coffee crew. "He's new here. He doesn't get to ignore me." What Linda didn't know was that Jake wasn't as simple as he looked. He wasn't just some guy with a dog and a truck. There was something different about him, something she couldn't figure out. She thought he was clueless, maybe even a little dumb, because he didn't fight back. But Jake wasn't dumb at all. He saw everything. He noticed how Linda watched him from her window, peeking out behind her curtains. He heard her whispering to her friends when he walked by. He even spotted her once, late at night, sneaking around his mailbox like she was looking for something. Jake didn't say a word about it. He just kept his cool, acting like nothing was wrong. But deep down, he knew Linda was up to something and he was waiting to see what. The tension started to grow. It wasn't loud or obvious, like a big argument in the street. It was quiet, sneaky tension, the kind that makes you feel like something's about to happen. Linda kept picking on Jake. One day, she left another note on his door. "Move that mat," it said in big, messy letters. The next day, she called him out in front of everyone, yelling across the street, "Your dog's a problem. Do something about it." Neighbors peeked out their windows, wondering what was going on. Kids on bikes slowed down to listen. But Jake? He didn't yell back. He didn't even frown. He just waved and said, "Got it, Linda," like it was no big deal. That only made her angrier. Linda started telling everyone Jake was trouble. "He doesn't follow the rules," she said at her coffee meeting. "He's making our neighborhood look bad." Her friends nodded again, sipping their drinks. "We need to do something," Linda added, tapping her clipboard. She didn't know what yet, but she was sure Jake had to go. Maybe she'd fine him. Maybe she'd call someone important to complain. Whatever it was, she wasn't going to let him win. She was the queen of Maple Grove, and no new guy with a silly mat was going to ruin that. But here's the secret Linda didn't see: Jake wasn't scared of her because he had something up his sleeve. He wasn't just keeping his cool for fun. He was watching her, too. Every time she yelled, every time she wrote a note, Jake paid attention. He didn't miss a thing. Why? Because there was more to Jake than Linda could ever guess. She thought he was just a quiet guy with a loud dog, but she was wrong. Something about him was off, something big. And Linda? She was about to find out what it was, whether she liked it or not. Weeks passed in Maple Grove, and things started heating up. Linda Grayson, the HOA queen, wasn't happy, not one bit. Her complaints about Jake Carter got louder and louder, like a radio turned up too high. She couldn't stand him. Every day, she found something new to grumble about. She'd stand on her porch, squinting at Jake's house, and snap pictures of his welcome mat with her phone. "Look at this," she'd say to herself, zooming in on that wipe your paws mat like it was a crime scene. She'd scribble notes on her clipboard, two things like "dog barks at 7 a.m. or "mat still ugly." She was on a mission to make Jake look bad, and she wasn't going to stop. It didn't end with pictures and notes. Oh no, Linda took it further. One sunny afternoon, she called a big neighborhood meeting. She sent out little flyers to everyone, saying, "Come talk about the new guy." So, people showed up at her house, sitting in her living room with cups of tea and cookies. Linda stood in front, holding her pen like it was a sword. "He's trouble," she told them, pointing that pen at the air. "Jake doesn't follow rules. His mat's a mess, and that dog Max, he's too noisy. We can't let this go on." Her coffee clutch crew nodded, muttering things like "Yes, Linda, and you're right." The rest of the neighbors just listened, some looking bored, some looking curious. Linda wanted everyone to agree: Jake had to change or leave. Meanwhile, Jake wasn't loud or mad about any of this. He stayed quiet, doing his usual stuff. He'd mow his lawn, walk Max around the block, and sit on his porch with a soda. If you saw him, you'd think nothing bothered him. He'd wave at kids on bikes and toss Max a ball like everything was fine. But here's the thing: Jake wasn't blind. He saw what Linda was up to. He noticed her sneaking around his house, peeking through his windows when she thought he wasn't looking. One time, he even caught her digging through his trash cans late at night. Weird, right? She had her flashlight out, poking through old cans and papers like a raccoon. What was she looking for? Jake didn't know, but it made him wonder. He didn't yell at her, though. He didn't run outside and say, "Hey, stop that." Nope. Jake just watched from his window, staying super calm. Linda didn't see him, she was too busy rummaging. When she finally gave up and stomped back to her house, Jake turned to Max, who was snoozing on the couch. He tossed him a treat, a little bone-shaped snack, and said, "She's digging her own hole, buddy." Max wagged his tail and chomped the treat, happy as ever. But what did Jake mean? Digging her own hole? It was a funny thing to say, like he knew something Linda didn't. Something big was coming, and Jake wasn't worried at all. You'll see why soon, it's about to get really good. Linda kept going, though. She didn't slow down. Every time she saw Jake, she'd huff and puff like an angry dragon. "Your dog barked again," she'd shout across the street. Or, "That Matt's still there." Jake would just smile and nod, saying, "I'll check on it," in his easy, quiet way. It drove Linda nuts. She wanted him to fight back so she could win, but he wouldn't give her that chance. Instead, he watched her closer. He saw how she'd wait by her mailbox, pretending to get her letters, but really staring at his house. He saw her talking to her friends, pointing at him like he was a problem. And he started noticing little clues, things that didn't add up. Like, why was Linda so mad about a mat? It was just a mat. And Max? He barked sometimes, sure, but he wasn't that loud. Other dogs in Maple Grove barked, too, and Linda didn't care about them. Why Jake? Why now? It didn't make sense. Jake started thinking maybe it wasn't about the mat or the dog at all. Maybe Linda had another reason to pick on him, something sneaky. He didn't say anything out loud, though. He kept it all in his head, watching and waiting. Every time Linda got mad, he'd toss Max another treat and say, "Let her keep going, boy." It was like he was playing a game, a secret game Linda didn't know about. The neighbors started whispering, too. Some thought Linda was being silly. "It's just a mat," Mrs. Jenkins said one day, shaking her head. Others sided with Linda, saying, "Yeah, he should fix it." The street felt split, like a tug of war was starting. Kids on bikes would ride by Jake's house slower now, looking at that mat like it was famous. People peeked out their windows more, waiting to see what would happen next. It was getting tense, but not loud tense, quiet tense, like the air before a big rain. Linda was pushing harder, and Jake was staying cool. Something had to give, right? One day, Linda went too far. She stuck a big sign in her yard that said, "Follow the rules," in bright red letters. Everyone knew it was about Jake. She smirked when she hammered it into the ground, thinking she'd won. But Jake? He just looked at it from his porch, sipping his soda, and chuckled. Max barked once, then flopped down for a nap. Jake didn't seem scared or mad, he seemed ready. Ready for what? That's the question. Linda thought she was in charge, but Jake was noticing more than she realized. He saw her sneaky moves, her trash digging, her little meetings. And he was keeping track, quiet as a mouse. One sunny afternoon, Linda Grayson finally lost it. She'd been mad at Jake Carter for weeks, but this was the day she couldn't take it anymore. It all started with that welcome mat, the one that said "Wipe your paws." Jake's mat was crooked again, leaning a little to the side like it didn't care. To Linda, that was the last straw. She'd warned him so many times. She'd left notes, yelled across the street, and even put up a sign. But there it was, still crooked, still ugly in her eyes. She stood on her porch, fists clenched, and decided she'd had enough. "That's it," she said to herself, her voice shaking with anger. She was going to make Jake pay. Linda whipped out her phone like it was a weapon. She dialed 911, the emergency number, and waited for someone to answer. When they did, she screeched into the phone, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "There's a disturbance at 42 Oak Street," she shouted. "This man's breaking every rule we've got. His mat's a mess, his dog's loud, do something." She hung up, crossed her arms, and stood there on her porch, smirking. She thought she'd won. In her mind, the police would come, see Jake's mat, hear Max bark, and take him away. She could almost hear the sirens already. Linda felt powerful, like the Queen of Maple Grove again. She waited, tapping her foot, sure that Jake was in big trouble now. And sure enough, a cop car rolled up the street not long after. The tires crunched on the pavement, and the red and blue lights flashed just a little. Linda's smirk got bigger. She leaned forward, watching as two officers stepped out of the car. They were tall, with shiny badges and serious faces. "Here we go," Linda whispered to herself, thinking they'd march right to Jake's house. She couldn't wait to see him squirm. But then, oh, this is where it gets wild. The officers didn't go to Jake's door. Nope. They turned and walked straight toward Linda's house instead. Their boots thumped on the sidewalk, and their hands rested on their belts. Linda's smirk disappeared fast. Her eyes got wide, and her mouth dropped open. "Wait, what's this about?" she stammered, her voice all shaky now. The neighbors started peeking out their windows. Kids on bikes stopped riding to stare. Something big was happening, and everyone could feel it. Linda took a step back as the officers got closer. "Is this your house, ma'am?" one of them asked, his voice deep and calm. Linda nodded, confused. "Why yes, but I called about him," she said, pointing at Jake's place. The officers didn't even look over there. They just stared at her. "We need to talk to you," the other one said, pulling out a little notebook. Linda's heart started pounding. What was going on? This wasn't her plan. Right then, Jake stepped outside. His front door creaked open, and out he came, with Max trotting behind him. Max's tail wagged like always, happy and clueless. Jake didn't look scared or mad, he looked calm, like he'd just woken up from a nap. He walked over to his rusty truck and leaned against it, arms crossed, watching everything. The officers were at Linda's porch now, and she was turning red, trying to explain. "No, no, you've got it wrong," she said, waving her hands. "He's the problem. His mat, his dog, arrest him." But Jake just smiled a little and called out, "Hey, Linda." His voice was so easy, so relaxed, it made everyone turn to look at him. "Didn't I mention?" Jake said, scratching Max behind the ears. "I'm not just the new guy. I'm an undercover cop." The whole street went quiet. You could hear a bird chirp, but that was it. Linda's face froze. What?" she squeaked. Jake nodded, still leaning on his truck. "Yep. Been keeping an eye on some shady stuff around here. Guess whose name kept popping up?" He pointed at Linda, and her knees wobbled. The color drained from her face, she went white as a ghost. One of the officers pulled out a pair of handcuffs, the metal glinting in the sun. Linda's eyes got huge. "No, wait," she yelled, but it was too late. Here's the big reveal: Linda wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She'd been doing something sneaky, something bad. Turns out, she was running a little scam with the HOA. She'd been forging papers, pretending people owed extra fees, and then keeping the money for herself. She thought she was so smart, bossing everyone around, but Jake? He'd been onto her the whole time. That's why he moved to Maple Grove. He wasn't just some guy with a dog and a mat, he was a cop, working in secret to catch her. All those weeks she'd been yelling about his mat and Max, he'd been watching her, collecting clues, waiting for the right moment. The officers stepped closer to Linda. "Ma'am, you're under arrest," one said, holding up the handcuffs. "You've been stealing from the HOA." Linda shook her head fast. "No. That's not true. He's lying," she shouted, pointing at Jake. But the officers didn't listen. They had proof, papers, bank stuff, all the things Jake had found. Linda had been digging through his trash, trying to figure out who he was, but she didn't know he was already one step ahead. Her sneaky plan had fallen apart, and now she was caught. Jake watched it all, still calm. Max sat next to him, panting happily, like this was just another day. The neighbors gasped and whispered. "She stole," one said. "Jake's a cop," another asked. Kids on bikes stared with big eyes. Linda tried to argue more, but the officers gently turned her around and clicked the handcuffs on her wrists. "Let's go," they said, leading her to the cop car. Her clipboard fell to the ground with a clatter, and her sign "Follow the Rules" stood there like a joke. Linda wasn't the queen anymore. She was in big, big trouble. Jake didn't cheer or laugh. He just looked at Max and said, "Good job, buddy." He'd known all along. That mat? That barking? It didn't matter. Linda thought she was winning, but Jake had the real power. The street buzzed with shock as the cop car drove away, Linda in the back, staring out the window. This was the moment everything flipped, and it was wild. Stick around, because what happens next is just as good. The whole neighborhood stood frozen, eyes wide, as the police led Linda Grayson away. Her hands were in handcuffs, and she still held onto her clipboard tight, like it was her last hope. But it couldn't save her now. The cop car door opened, and she climbed in, looking small and scared, not like the bossy queen she used to be. Everyone watched from their porches and windows, whispering to each other. "She's gone," one neighbor said. "They caught her," said another. Kids on bikes stopped riding, staring as the car drove off down the street. Linda was in big trouble, and Maple Grove would never be the same. Jake Carter didn't cheer or jump around. He didn't even smile big. He just stood by his truck, patted Max on the head, and said, "Good boy. We got her." Max wagged his tail and barked once, happy as ever. Jake was calm, like always, but inside he knew he'd done something huge. He wasn't just the new guy with a goofy dog and a crooked mat, he was the hero who'd cleaned up the neighborhood. Linda had been sneaky, stealing money from the HOA, but Jake stopped her. And now, everyone knew the truth. Word spread fast, like wildfire. By the next morning, every house in Maple Grove was buzzing with the news. "Jake's a cop," kids said at school. "He tricked her," moms told each other over coffee. People couldn't believe it. The quiet guy with the rusty truck had been watching Linda all along. He wasn't a slacker or a troublemaker. He was the good guy, and he'd saved them from Linda's scam. Neighbors who used to ignore him started waving. Mrs. Jenkins brought him more cookies. Even Tim, the mailman, gave Max an extra pat. Jake wasn't just part of the neighborhood now, he was its star. A week later, the HOA had a big meeting. Everyone showed up, filling the room with cheers and chatter. Linda wasn't there, of course, she was busy with the police. The neighbors didn't waste time. "She's out," someone shouted, and they all voted fast. Linda wasn't the boss anymore, no more clipboard, no more rules about mats. Then, someone had an idea, "Let's thank Jake." So they threw him a little party right there. They brought cake, soda, and a big bone for Max. People clapped him on the back and said, "Good job." Jake smiled and said, "Thanks," but he didn't brag. He just ate some cake and let Max chew his treat. That welcome mat? It stayed right where it was, crooked and all. Nobody dared complain, not after what happened. It wasn't just a mat anymore, it was like a trophy, a reminder that Jake had won. Linda's old coffee clutch crew, the ones who always nodded at her orders, didn't know what to do. They sat quiet now, sipping their drinks with nothing to say. Without Linda, they weren't so tough. She was facing charges, big ones, for stealing that money. The police had all the proof, thanks to Jake, and she wasn't coming back anytime soon. Justice was served, and it felt good. Linda thought she could boss everyone forever, but Jake showed her she was wrong. He didn't need to yell or fight, he just did his job, quiet and smart. The neighborhood was free from her scams, and they had Jake to thank. It was like a big win, with a side of dog treats for Max. Maple Grove was peaceful again, and everyone learned something: don't mess with the new guy, especially if he's got a secret. Okay, let's wrap this up with something to think about. Here's the big lesson from Jake and Linda's story: sometimes the person you think is just there, like background noise, turns out to be the one running the show. Think about it. Jake Carter didn't look like much, just a guy with a beat-up truck, a goofy dog named Max, and a crooked welcome mat. He didn't talk loud or act big. He didn't shout at Linda or fight her when she yelled about his mat or Max's barking. Nope. He stayed quiet, watched everything, and waited for the right moment. And guess what? He won. He didn't need to make a fuss, he was smart and sneaky in a good way, and that made him the real hero. Then there's Linda. She thought she was the boss of Maple Grove. She had her clipboard, her rules, and her coffee clutch crew who always said yes to her. She judged Jake right away: his mat was ugly, his dog was loud, and he didn't fit her perfect little world. She thought she could scare him off or get him in trouble just because he didn't look important. But boy, was she wrong. Linda learned the hard way that judging people by what's on the outside, like a welcome mat, doesn't tell you the whole story. She picked on Jake, thinking he was weak, but he turned out to be stronger than she could ever imagine. Her big plan fell apart, and she ended up in handcuffs, all because she didn't see who Jake really was. So, what's the point? It's simple: don't be too quick to decide who someone is. The quiet kid in class, the new neighbor with the messy yard, or even the person who doesn't talk much, they might surprise you. Jake didn't need to be loud to be powerful. He watched Linda dig her own hole, and when the time was right, he showed everyone the truth. That's pretty cool, right? It's like a secret superpower, being calm and smart instead of noisy and mean. Linda thought she had it all figured out, but Jake proved that the ones who don't show off can still come out on top. Think about your own life for a second. Have you ever met someone who seemed boring or regular at first, but then turned out to be amazing? Maybe it was a friend who was quiet but super good at something, like drawing, or soccer. Or maybe it was someone older, like a teacher or a grandparent, who didn't say much but knew a ton of stuff. People like that are all around us, hiding in plain sight, just like Jake. Next time you see someone who doesn't stand out, maybe give them a second look. They could be hiding something awesome, waiting for the right moment to shine. This story makes you wonder, doesn't it? It's not about being the loudest or the bossiest. It's about being yourself and doing what's right, even if nobody notices at first. Jake didn't care what Linda thought of his mat or his dog. He just kept going, doing his job, and in the end, he made things better for everyone. That's the kind of person I'd want to be, someone who doesn't need to yell to be heard. What about you? Would you rather be a Jake or a Linda? I bet most of us would pick Jake, right? He's proof that you don't need a crown to be a king or a queen. Linda's mistake was thinking she could judge Jake by his outside stuff, his truck, his mat, his dog. She didn't bother to look deeper, and that's why she lost. It's a good reminder for all of us, don't judge too fast. People are more than what you see. Maybe that kid with the messy hair is a genius at math. Maybe the lady with the old coat is secretly a superhero in her own way. You never know until you give them a chance. Jake got his chance, and he showed everyone what he could do. Linda. She didn't see it coming, and that's on her. So, here's a little challenge for you: next time you're out there in school, at the park, or just walking around, look for the quiet ones. The ones who don't make a big deal about themselves. Watch them for a bit. Maybe they're like Jake, holding onto a secret that's bigger than anyone guesses. And if you've got a story like that, someone you know who turned out to be more than they seem, tell me about it. Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Seriously, have you ever met a Jake in your life? Someone who surprised you in a big way? Let's talk about it. This isn't the end, either. Stories like this happen all the time, and I've got more to share. Jake and Linda's tale is just one adventure, there's plenty more where that came from. So stick with me, okay? Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next story. Who knows what we'll find next time, maybe another hero hiding behind a goofy dog or a crooked mat? For now, remember what Jake showed us: the quiet ones can be the strongest, and the ones who judge too fast, they might just miss the whole show. See you soon.